There are many obstacles that can block the path to a successful software project. When you come across one, it helps to think like a seasoned hiker and follow the trail marked by blue blazes around the problem so that you can get back on course and keep moving forward. Welcome to Blue Blazes Podcast. I'm your host for the journey, Jay Tower, and I'm a partner and principal consultant at Trailhead Technology Partners. In this series, we talk with industry experts who share their best tips for avoiding the pitfalls on the path to successful software projects. My guest in this episode of Blue Blazes is Clark Sell. Clark is a seasoned software developer, architect, and product manager, but is probably best known as the co-founder of the very successful That Conference family of tech conferences, currently taking place in both Wisconsin and Texas. He also co-founded Unspecified, a boutique software development company, after previously leaving his mark on industry giants such as Allstate, Microsoft, and Telerik. At Unspecified, Clark uses his application development skills to help small businesses build software to improve their business. In this episode, Clark and I talk about community and learning through the lens of attending in-person events such as That Conference. It's a very timely topic in this era when we're all realizing how important being back together is, and many of us are returning back to in-person events. I really enjoyed having this conversation, and I hope you enjoy listening to it too. Hey, Clark, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
That's definitely my pleasure. It's really nice to see you again, and really nice to have you on the podcast talking about what I think is a pretty important topic, and I know one that you're passionate about. So let's jump right into it, if you don't mind.
Let's go. I'm
All
ready.
right.
Drill me.
So among your other many accomplishments, something that you're fairly well known for in the software industry is a conference that you started first in Wisconsin, now in Texas, called That Conference. And by the way, it's everybody's favorite conference name joke to make about which conference, that conference.
Yep.
So tell me a little bit about like how you got started with that.
Sure. It was started out of a desire to bring together what I thought was a fragmented community. And I mean that kind of at a larger sense. I live in the upper Midwest, so halfway between Chicago, Milwaukee, Madison, Rockford, pick kind of all the major metros kind of up this way, Twin Cities. And 12, 13 years ago now, at that time, and still true today, you had lots of, the Ruby faction, the .NET faction, the database faction, and there was no just faction. I don't know why I keep saying faction, but there was just no common thread between things. And, women in tech was a problem. I think you can fast forward, sure, it's still a problem, but really kind of succession planning and exposure to tech across anything is a problem. And so, how could you get everybody away from the city to go and learn and level up and have a little fun to do it and give a kid safe place to go and meet one's spouse? What would that look like? And
yeah,
so we started That Conference.
One of the things that's a bit unique about your format, there's a few other conferences that do this format as well, but you hosted at an indoor water park, and families and spouses and other friends, I guess, are all kind of invited to join in, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And, the water park, when you kind of look around the area and the cities, the water park is obviously a family-friendly place, but it also happens to be in the middle of Wisconsin and in the middle of a series of cornfields in a town that's like the water park capital of the United States. So it worked, kind of distance, geography. It worked in a sense of getting people away from their cities, which is important to me because I didn't want people to kind of slip back into, I could just go home, and then work slips in and this slips in, and then, things don't get done. So, it's an interesting place to find a venue. Kind of looking back after all these years, what does a venue look like now? It's been on cruise ships. It's been
Hmm.
actual little literal campsites. But the water park's a fun place, and
Yeah.
for those who think water park, it's also a world class convention center, right? It's not, we're
Right.
also not camping. It's a theme, so
Yeah.
it all
Yeah.
kind
Yeah.
of it all kind of fits together.
Great hotel and restaurants in it and everything
Yeah,
you need, right?
yeah, yeah.
Uh, One of the things I kind of like about that format is that, if there's, for those that are in the industry that are also family people, it's a great opportunity to bring your family with you, which sometimes can be a bit of a barrier, being away from home. Hey, you've been gone for work and now you're going to be gone for this. And, hey, the family can come along and everybody can have fun. I think that's pretty great.
Yeah, we certainly get some pushback from companies who are like, "Oh, this is a vacation and it's and this and that." It's like, no, that's not the case by any stretch.
Yeah.
We try to have as much to do for the families, the professionals, kind of bring them together. All those walks, and we
Hmm.
do it at a time which, quite honestly, well, at least for Wisconsin, it's in the middle of travel season.
Hmm.
It's not the cheapest time to do it, but it is the time when everybody's off of school and
Yep.
you can kind of guarantee that if there was a chance of getting family together, it's kind of like that, hopefully that time, because as I've come to find out as my kids have gotten older, you have, camps and all the other things that kind of fall into
Sure.
life, if you
Life.
will.
Yep.
Yeah, life.
So there's probably a number of software developers. I go to so many conferences, I sometimes forget about this, but there's probably a number that have never been to an event like this before. What is your
There's I'd
bullet
say there's a
list
number
pitch?
who haven't I'd say there's a
Yeah,
number who haven't even been to an event.
yeah,
Period.
yeah. Right, like a meetup or anything like that
Yep.
either.
Yep.
So for a conference like this, a multi-day conference with keynotes and breakout sessions and workshops and all of this, what is your like bullet list pitch to somebody who hasn't been to one of these before? What do they have to gain from this?
Well, this is something that, depending upon who you talk to, right? If you're talking to a boss, you're going to get kind of one answer versus
Hmm.
talking to a person. I'll assume the person on the other end of this is kind of the attendee, not necessarily maybe the
Sure.
buyer, whatnot. But um, when I think about and what I'll say kind of represents my own personal view and kind of how we do things. I think about one's network. After 25 years of doing software development, which makes me really feel old, um, I the world is literally no different today than it was before. Meaning, a new framework will come in. There'll be a new big company that'll come in, come out. But like the level of learning, the network, the size of the industry, like none of that feels like it's really ever changed. Software engineering has a unique aspect that we can work together globally. For the most part, there are a few exceptions to this rule, but for the most part, most software engineers, developers, testers, not designers, speak English. Um, and so this barrier to entry between everybody is really low. We're also heavily backed on the fact that community um, is a big piece of how products grow, get documented, get learned, get shared. And so when I think about a conference, I think about, you're coming to see tech. You may be coming to get exposure, and I'm going to use that word over educated because, yes, you can get educated, but back when I was a kid, right, you would read books and you would do the thing and you kind of take it further. Today, you can watch a video, you can get free MIT courses. Like, there's a lot of places to get educated. Um, and but the thing that you can't get is experiences. And
Hmm.
by that, I mean, you, Jay, you've done certain things and you have a different twist on the same thing that I've done that has a different twist because the context of which we did it. And we could be working on the same function and the same thing in the same library, but
Hmm.
our two worlds just have enough context around it that has made it drastically different. And so I think of the conference as this ability that says, there's a bunch of tech that brings us together. We get some exposure, but at the same token, now you have the ability to grow your network. Now you have the ability to ask harder questions. Now you have the ability to try to connect 365 days out of the year. And that's the important part for me is the conference is it's here and gone. Like it's a 4 day
Hmm.
thing. But the reality is we're trying to build a community, support you online in person. So
Yeah.
when you need help or whatever, right?
Yep.
You have a tribe of people who also share the same interests. And wouldn't it be great if we could create exposure for kids that could see their
Hmm.
parents be a hero? And right, I can kind of
Hmm.
go on and on. But you know, conferences are what you make them. There's this seems to be a thing going around in my world today where it's like a gym membership. You can have the membership, but you got to go in there and lift the weights and do the work. And I think
Yeah.
it's very true for a conference. You can show up and you can walk out and you can get nothing out of it. And you can sit there and say, "Hey, this is terrible. I didn't learn anything."
Yep.
Or you could be like me who leaves, you know, just spent, destroyed. Um, and I've made friends, I've cemented relationships, I've learned about new
Hmm.
products, I've gotten job opportunity or job um, work opportunities, whatnot. So,
Hmm.
there's a lot that gets packed into, that time.
Yeah. It's more than just exchanging information, right?
Yeah, very much so.
All right. So here we are, some number of months or years outside of this pandemic thing that we all lived through.
Yep.
And I've noticed, and perhaps you've noticed this too, I've noticed that a lot of people kind of got used to staying at home. And you could say it got to be a habit, maybe even a bad habit,
Yep.
to kind of not get out and connect and do things. And
Yep.
I'm sure over the next several years, that'll rebuild up to a certain level. But Um, what's for somebody who is kind of feeling that right now? Like, what's your argument with them, or what's your pitch to them to say, maybe it's time to um,
Get out.
get back out there and connect? Yeah, yeah, that's right. Breathe some fresh air. Try some
Yeah.
Wisconsin air, right?
I um we in tech hyper pivoted, um and I think I unfortunately think it's gonna bite us in the ass, if you will. Um, I've been working at home since 2005. I've worked for U.S. based companies, uh, foreign companies, whatnot, and now work for myself. Um, and working from home is great. There are things you can do that's online, like you and I right now. But this conversation that we're having now would be even better if we were having in person. And we
Hmm.
as developers, we tend to um, think about the mechanics a lot, and we say, okay, that's achievable, without necessarily thinking like, sure, we did the work, but you're right. What if it
Hmm.
was better? What if we could write on a whiteboard? What if we could do that? And um, so everybody got to work from home. And the best part about all of that is we got this kind of circuit breaker in life of we all went through the same storm, but we were all in different boats.
Hmm.
And everybody's had a bit of a different experience with it. At the end of the day, we're all human. We all need some kind of social interaction. Now you got the Surgeon General who's like, loneliness is a thing. Um, and you literally, as I alluded to earlier, there are people who have graduated school or whatnot, maybe in like 2019 or even 2018, who have never experienced an event, a code camp, a this or that. And a lot of those things, they've just flat folded up and are gone. So
Hmm.
it's some are coming back. That's cool. I think if you, at the end of the day, you have to invest in yourself, and your network's a big deal. And uh, just meeting others is a big deal. And I
Yeah,
just there are things you can do in person that are great, and there are things that you can do online that are great, but the two are not the same. There is
right.
a bit of a Venn diagram where things kind of overlap, but
Hmm.
an online
Not
event,
much.
right. An online event is an online event, and it should be treated in what you can do online, and it should not be made to like what an in-person event is. And I can say that today,
Yeah.
and everybody's like, right, that sucks. But 2 years ago, we were like, oh no, you could totally do that. And you're like, nobody's doing that. Like
Yeah.
you all are bored. You don't want to do that.
You you mentioned this earlier, or you kind of alluded to this, but I feel like when I leave these in-person events and I've had I've made the most of it and met some people and connected and learned some things, or been exposed to some things. I liked how you said that.
Yeah.
I leave energized in an exhausting and great way, if that makes
Yep.
sense.
No, I mean,
Mm.
you're spot on. You leave
Yeah.
fueled, you leave, hopefully, you leave, inspired to explore new things. You leave with a
Mhm.
um, uh, sense of community, but that's kind of an overplayed word, but like this sense of like belonging,
Mhm.
um, where you've seen other people, you've talked to them, you've met new relationships, right? It's a good jumping off point, and
Totally.
just not enough of it happens. I mean,
Mhm.
um, and this working from home thing, like it or not, people are going to go back to office. You know,
Mhm.
we barked a little too hard, right? And then the foot's going to come down. And then instead of there being like a nice balance, we're going to swing back the other way. And then you're never, ever going to be able to work from home. It's like,
Right.
come on, there's a happy middle. None of us know what it is, but we have to
Yeah. We're
acknowledge
still
that,
trying to find it.
yeah, let's acknowledge that there are things you can do well in person. And then there are things that you can do, well online. And it's not trying to make them kind of pixel parody of one another.
Right. So you've mentioned this a couple of times, but I think there's a maybe a larger than average percentage in our industry of introverts than there are in the general public. Maybe
Yeah.
that's getting less true in the younger generations in the industry, but I think that's definitely true people around our age. But
I think it's a
um,
convenient excuse at times too.
I think that's a good yes, because introvert does not mean you don't need to be social. It just
Yep.
means that you energize differently. But
Yeah.
um, so let's say you think of yourself as an introvert, and this whole like conference thing seems super intimidating, unless you're going to bring a buddy from work with you or something. If you're talking to someone who's attending their first conference, how do you tell them? How do you how do you get over that? Like, how do you meet people? How do you talk to people? How do you interact with a bunch of just strangers who are kind of otherwise minding their own business and looking at their phones, during breaks?
Yeah. One, put your phone in your pocket. Two, look at people and shake their hands.
Hmm.
Um, I would say, um, the first thing is, really, you're not trying to meet everybody. All you need to do is meet a few.
Hmm.
Um, because once you meet a few will help make introductions to others, right?
Hmm.
So knowing kind of why you're there, what you kind of want to get out of it, the types of people you may want to meet. Like if you're looking to meet other svelte people, great. Gotta just find somebody who knows something about svelte, and then the next thing you know, you're gonna get a bunch of people who are like, yeah, like, hey, come to
Yeah.
the tribe. Like we want you here. Um,
You guys have like an open birds of a feather type room at your event,
yep,
right?
yep.
Oh, that's a great opportunity.
We called open spaces. I mean, from an
Yeah.
event perspective, we do a bunch of things. Like
Hmm.
right now, you can go on, if you have a ticket, you can enable something we call Meet That Camper. We do a random introduction to somebody, another attendee who has a ticket, so that you can kind of make an introduction ahead of time.
Hmm.
Um, we have open spaces, but the re- the reality is like just think of all the interactions that you have with things. So sit at a different table every day. If you're at
Hmm.
a table, always leave a seat open so that somebody else feels invited to be there. If you go to a session, you got two things in common. You either like the speaker, or you like the topic. Go to the person next to you and say, "Hey, what are you interested about? Bloody thing, or have you ever
Yeah.
heard so and so speak before?" And
Yeah.
you'll be surprised, looking somebody in the eye and shaking their hands. Like, ask the conference organizers. Like, there's 1,000 ways to get involved.
Yeah.
Um, and
There's that.
most
There's that.
don't do, I mean, most don't
Yeah.
do anything.
Yeah.
So you're like, you're not even taking advantage of it. So a little bit goes a long way.
There's that old rule that says that everyone else is too busy worried what you're thinking about them to be thinking anything about you, right? So
Yeah.
everyone else is probably experiencing those same anxieties and feels like, oh, I don't know anybody here, and
Hmm.
I got to keep my eyes down on my phone or whatever. So you
I
you break that ice,
yeah.
right?
I you know, I try to shake everybody's hands when they're getting registered,
Hmm.
and it's me trying to set an expectation that it's okay to say hello to one another.
Yeah.
It's me trying to break the ice for you so that you've already had one interaction that says, "Oh, I met that guy," right? And at that point,
Mm.
I did the work. So now you should feel like you can ask me something, and I not that I could take 1,000 questions all at once, but the point being, it's our behaviors that as a community, it's our behaviors that welcome those exchanges. So
Yeah.
if everybody's sitting at a table and they're on their phone, well, it's not really an inviting table, right?
Yeah.
If
Right.
you're a sponsor and you're sitting on your laptop and you're looking away, think anybody's gonna walk up to you? Hell no. Yeah, keep on walking. You're
Yeah.
not even interested enough to pay attention to the people that are walking by.
Hmm.
So, it's a we, right? It's not any individual person, and um, you know, there's also not one thing that works for just everybody as a whole either.
As a frequent speaker at events myself, I feel like go say hi or thanks or ask a question afterwards to the speaker. That's a great person to meet. That's kind of their job to be there and talk to the people who are interested in their topic. And, they put a lot of work into it and often for very little or nothing in return. And so,
Yeah,
to go up and
yeah.
just say thanks and introduce yourself, it's always totally appreciated.
So you just hit on a big thing, which I don't think really ever happens, and that is
Mm,
expressing some bit of gratitude.
mm,
I can count on one hand over 13 years, 14 events, two different states, the number of times somebody like has like during an event come up and said hi, like a speaker saying, "Hey, thanks for the opportunity." It's
mhm.
been very, very minimal. And that's not me like downplaying whatever. But to your point, like going up to the speaker and saying thank you, it's a wonderful introduction that not only makes the speaker feel valued, right?
Mhm.
But you completely open the door for more. And
Yep.
it's such a simple thing. And there's some science behind, practicing gratitude and what it'll do, in
Yeah.
between and all that. So it's a great hack.
Um, I always say that there's two different kinds of attendees or attendees that are looking for two different kinds of sessions when they attend one of these conferences. And this is kind of an oversimplification, but I think it's a little true. There's somebody that says, "Oh, it's that technology. I need to know that soon, or I need to know more about that soon. I'm gonna go to this session." And the other group is the everything I'm doing at work is with 20, 30, 40-year-old technology, and I'm dying inside, and I just got to see somebody doing something cool and new.
Something else? Huh.
Yeah. Um, so, as you think about all the people you've seen attend your events or the events you've attended, how do you think people can go about choosing what sessions they're going to attend and what would be the most valuable for them?
Well, kind of there's a lot of context in that, right?
Hmm.
If you're one of the hardest things for us with that conference is we're we set out to be a polyglot thing, which means anything and everything goes. So we're the we're the master of experiences, but there's no there's no super deep dives. You're not going to get 4 days of React. Like it's just
Right.
you're going to get a little bit of React. Um, if your boss has got their boot on your neck about you got to learn more about my stack, then the chances are they're probably asking you to come back with like, what sessions did you attend and how much better is my stack going to be because you spent four
Hmm.
days on this thing and I've
Right.
invested all of $1,000.
Hmm.
I mean, in that scenario, I'd be looking for the people, right? I'd be going to a session that's semi related. to say, hey, what's my network of like React folks to where maybe I can go into an open spaces or a hallway track or something to go, hey, I had this thing. What do you think about this thing? Right. Maybe trying to set that network up greater. If I'm a person who's trying to learn, if you will, kind of what's the beat, current beat, then I'd be going to everything I didn't know anything about
Mm-hmm.
and going, what is this? Like, why do I need this?
Yeah.
And in fact, we were talking about it in Slack the other day. Folks were talking about feeling like they don't give themselves enough learning time. Well, this is a great time to go. What stuff that I don't get to pay attention to can I learn from free at like the fastest possible way ever? And you can go, cool, like it, note it, check it out.
Mm-hmm.
Cool, that sucks. Don't want to do anything with it. Never going to look at it again. Move on to the next one. Um, and I would encourage people like, hey, if that's you don't like it or you don't like the speaker, get up and leave. Like
Yep.
you can do it discreetly. You don't, it's not rude. You're there for a reason. Jump in another session. Like, don't waste your time.
That's right. You don't have to throw your stuff down on the ground and stomp out. You can
Right. Yeah.
step out silently and nobody will be offended.
Yeah.
Uh, Not every session's for everyone. That's totally expected.
Totally.
Um, yeah, I like the idea of going to a new, looking for a name of a technology that you have no idea, or maybe you've only heard of, and saying uh, like if someone's talking about it, people must be using it for something. It must be useful, and maybe I'll go check this out.
Yeah.
Happy accidents happen that way, right?
Yeah, totally. I mean, it certainly led me into places where I'm like, oh, yeah, I I thanks for the, 2-week primer because you gave me the why. And
Yeah.
I don't need to go now I could go build on that and find my own why.
So another aspect of conferences is sponsors. Often they'll be on site in like an expo hall or something like that, with some
Yep.
booths and looking to meet
Yep.
people. Sometimes they're recruiting, sometimes they're selling their services or products.
Yeah.
I feel like we as engineers can be a bit of a suspicious lot of that sort of thing. Like, don't sell to me. I don't know if it's the like engineering way of thinking about things or if it's the I don't know, something else. But anyway,
Yeah.
what's the value for an attendee to get in that room with all the booths and all the salespeople and start meeting and talking to people?
Well, they're the best part about a sponsor is they're financially incented to be there. Um,
Mm-hmm.
we we work pretty hard to have sponsors that are relevant to our audience at hand. Um, we say no to folks at times, but they're they're coming for let's back up. They're coming for typically one of three reasons, and maybe more than one of these, but it's branding, like brand awareness, it's
Mm-hmm.
recruiting, it's some kind of services or sales, like product sales, whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and and at times, if you take those things, there's also a want to validate the tech that they're doing in the community itself, right? So if you're
Mm-hmm.
recruiting and you got an old stack, are trying to go, okay, well, what's the hotness? Because I can't find people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, there are sponsors who get deeply engaged in the experience in the community and the people. So they have a vested interest to see the thing succeed. And really, like anything in life, they're also a point of your network, right? They
Mm-hmm.
could lead you to something else that's there. So knowing kind of what they're doing, um, you may or may not be the right person, but you may be the right connector to somebody else.
Yeah.
And it's at least for us, we don't have like a giant expo hall. We have a smaller number of sponsors on purpose so that you have time to speak with them. They're all doing pretty cool stuff. They're all in tech in some regards. So
Mm-hmm.
kind of learning about what they do and why they're there helps you kind of formulate, how can you leverage them? And it may not be today, it may be in 2 or 3 years, but you know, there's there's a good amount of stuff that happens,
Yeah.
um, and
Seems
they're
like,
supporting us, right? They're supporting you being there.
yeah, that's
So
right. I
even a
always, in my
simple thank you
talks,
is good.
right. In my talks, I always say, stop by and say thanks to the sponsors because they're making this a lot less expensive for me to
Hmm.
be here.
Yeah, in a big
Um,
way.
Big way. Yeah. Um, let's say someone's been listening to this conversation and, you and I have now convinced them they should go to an in-person event. Maybe they want to go to that conference
Yeah,
in
of course they
Wisconsin
do.
or Texas.
Absolutely.
And they've never done this before. Maybe they have a boss they need to convince. What's the best arguments to take to the boss to say this is a valuable way to spend money? It's not just about hanging out in a water park the whole week.
Well, I'd back up and say, ask yourself, why is it that you want to be there in the first place, right? Um, you have to determine if the value is there for you, first and foremost. And like, this is going to sound super blunt, but like, if you didn't want to be at that conference, I don't really want you there, right?
Right.
It's not good for the person sitting next to you. You're probably not going to enjoy it. That's cool. Like, find something that works, works for you. I think when it comes to like convincing your boss, their thing is always going to be, can I sell more of my product, depending upon a company you work for? How is this going to help me advance the team, yourself, you? And that comes down to a bit of you having to make the case that there are sessions, there are people or a community that they're missing out on by you not doing that. There's another factor of all this, is which most companies have a training budget allocated. So you probably have some funds already. Whether or not you've been asking for them or not, it's a different story. So
Mhm.
anybody
Probably,
who's
probably no
asking
one's
their
going to force
boss,
you to use them, right?
right, like, it works out well on their behalf if you're not using it, but
Yeah.
you know, training is always going to be the thing they're that's there. Now, the companies who really figure it out bring a whole team of people, and they realize it's good for morale boost, it's good for, the team collaboration and just getting together, it's good for, just kind of whole litany of reasons. And that's an angle too. We it's not rare, more common. It's more common than people might expect, that there's a 5, 10, 15 person team that has dropped doing dev the week and maybe
Mhm.
is at the conference, and maybe they're trying to hack on some stuff and have some fun doing a little team building, doing a little learning, having a little
Mhm.
fun. In our case, they bring their spouses, they get to meet, you know, their significant other, and, really cement a relationship differently than kind of normal business hours. So
All right, Clark. Now the trickiest question, which I always say for last. This is really just me cheating, and you're doing my homework for me to pick my next guests.
this is life.
But but we've been talking about a really important topic about attending in-person events and how you can benefit from that, and how the whole world and community can benefit from that. What other topics should we be talking about on the podcast that can help make software projects better? And maybe who should we talk to about those topics?
Um, there's been some point. Wow, my video got like nappy. At some point, my shelf to the left of me went from tech books to non-tech books. Now, granted, I run a business, so I kind of play in two different roles. But um, as I've gotten older, the learning as to how we work and communicate together. In fact, somebody earlier today was telling me about the Colby method or Colby report.
Hmm.
I don't know anything about it, but I wrote it down to look more into it. Um, so much falls down in software engineering because of just poor communication. Um, I look over and I see, you know, MVP books and some psychology stuff and how to learn more and design. And I think the mechanics of what we have and have learned over the years are so great, but the interpersonal stuff just takes you
Mm,
to the next level. How do you manage your time, your time? How do you get mentored? How do
mm,
you deal with the inner itty bitty committee in your head going on? How do you structure a team? And I mean, I don't want to say suffer, but I think about our own team of folks and how do I make sure that while we all work remote, we're all happy doing what we're doing, and how do we have the right touch points and how do we stay the most effective, and are we
mm,
using the right tools that we should be using, and should we throw out, and I have the luxury of going, cool, don't like that tool, I don't have to go call the procurement and say, hey, let's do an RFP. But um, don't know that we do enough on the softer side of things. And I'll back that up with any feedback that I've ever gotten at that conference has always been as a result of somebody who's been speaking on something soft skills related. I hate that term, but
mhm,
on the softer side, that's been the stuff that's changed people's lives and
mm,
taken them from where they are to maybe where they want to be.
mm.
And for those who come up and tell me you need less soft skills, I would say you need to be attending more of those because you think that they're irrelevant. Um, so,
Yeah, that's great feedback. There's so many of those soft skill topics that we could delve into, and I think we definitely will.
and
Thanks for
at
the suggestion.
at times it's uncomfortable, right?
Sure.
Communication's hard,
Yeah.
but when
Human
it's
part of
good,
software is the hard part.
yeah, when it's good and people
Hmm.
understand, boy, it makes a world of difference. I mean,
Totally.
huge world of difference.
Well, speaking of the human side of software, thanks for this great and very human conversation, Clark. I really appreciate your time and your expertise on this. If somebody wants to find out more about that conference and all the great stuff around that, how do they
Just
do that?
thatconference.com. Easy enough.
Perf- Perfect. Well, thanks again for your time today. Really
Absolutely.
enjoyed the conversation.
Thanks to
All right.
everybody
Bye
who's
bye.
taking the time listening.
That's the end of this Blue Blazes podcast. If you're interested in hearing more conversations like this one with industry experts focused on how to make software projects more predictably successful, make sure to subscribe. Trailhead can be found online at trailheadtechnology.com, on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. Until next time, thanks for listening.